Welcome everybody to the Andrew Bartzis New Teachings platform with another special show for you tonight. My name is Laura Massey from Two Feathers Medicine with Maty Waller and Dale Tobin, also from Two Feathers Medicine. So tonight we have got some incredible guests. Investigative, paranormal, they investigate paranormal activities. And we have Jonathan Dover and Stan Milford, who are paranormal rangers, and the incredible Michele Miners, who is an investigative journalist. Welcome to the show, guys, and Michele. Andrew, how would you like to kick off?
Well, how about we have you guys tell your story real quick? So, Stan and Jonathan, how you got into becoming paranormal rangers? How you were native police officers, and you were assigned to work on cases no one wanted to work. How
Sure.
did
You
you?
want to lead in? All right. I'll take the plunge here. Um, both me and Stan were rangers within the Navajo Rangers Department with the Navajo Nation. And the Navajo Nation is located in 3 states. It's an Indian reservation in Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. Covers 47,000 square miles of land, and or 17 million acres.
27,000.
Or 27,000, excuse me. And we were doing resource law enforcement. So we were doing forestry, fish and wildlife, water resources, minerals, agriculture. My specialty was archaeological law enforcement. And both me and Stan were in an area called special projects, where we did dignitary protection and major investigations, and investigations for other departments. We had a couple of rangers get assigned to a Bigfoot case where Grandma had seen a Bigfoot take a sheep out of her corral, tuck it under its arm, and walk off. So they sent 2 rangers who happened to be rookie rangers. And if you knew these guys, they were jokers. They loved to just laugh and have little private jokes and just giggling and needling each other all day long. And they got up there, and Grandma saw them doing this, and she took exception. She thought they were making fun of her and laughing at her. So she contacted our chief ranger and chewed him out as only a Navajo grandmother can. And after she was done, he called everybody in for a department meeting. And he basically read them the riot act and said, from now on, you will take these cases seriously and they will be investigated professionally. Then he turned to me and Stan, and I like to say that we were voluntold, because we never raised our hands or anything. And he says, and you 2 guys are going to get the major cases. And we just kind of looked at each other like, oh man, is this really happening? So that started in 2000, and 2000 for me up to 2011 when I retired. We did those cases for 11 years. It represented less than 1% of what we did in special projects, but the less than 1% became very real, and it was just amazing.
Had you had any paranormal experiences before you got put voluntold?
Stan, you want to field that one? I would say yes, we did.
Yes, both John and I have had experiences in our lifetimes. I've had experiences that were related to haunting activity in one of the residents that my mother had, and then later, as an adult coming to the Navajo reservation or living on the reservation as a young adult, I did have
an encounter with what people often refer to as a skinwalker or shapeshifter. So yeah, there was experiences leading into that, but
Was it
um,
a taboo subject to talk about, or was it commonly referred to in the culture?
um, so I come from two separate areas. I grew up in Oklahoma, and so the little town that I grew up in was the capital of the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. As you know, Indian Territory, which was what it was called prior to being named Oklahoma, there's a bunch of different Native American tribes from there. So each one of them has their own cultural rules and teachings, and although most of those tribes do have references to what was being referred to as a skinwalker or shapeshifter. There will be different variations within that, but most tribes do have that. And with the Navajo Nation, anything related to witchcraft or even the supernatural or paranormal phenomenon is in general a taboo area. Medicine men have to deal with that kind of thing on a regular basis, but yeah, it can be taboo, and I think that's what allowed me and John really to investigate these cases and really jump right into them because we come from two different cultures. We come from the Western society where we went to school in a non-native elementary school setting, through our junior high and into high school. But it did allow us to see two perspectives, see the traditional teachings and what's taught with the culture, native cultures, and then also see the scientific side of things.
Hmm? So, what kind of investigative techniques did you have to create to discover some of these cases? And what are some of the cases you'd like to share with us? Like, what's the first one that, made you absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is a paranormal,
I'll
thing
let
going on?
I'll let John field the investigative techniques because he has a I think, much broader investigative uh, level of skill and training and that kind of thing. So I'll let him lead with that.
Well, what we did is we applied the the investigative techniques that are used in, say, a homicide investigation. And I've done those type of investigations before. So we our standard is really high. We're looking for evidence that you can admit into a federal court system in the U.S., which is very strict. You have to be 99.9% sure of who you're charging to bring that evidence, as opposed to a civil case where you're only looking at preponderance of evidence, which is who has 51%. So what we did is we used these techniques. We had to modify some of them. Our investigations would become very, very intense. We would ask questions aside from the local, name, date of birth, place of birth, all that kind of stuff, all the usual things. We would further ask, do you use drugs recreationally? Do you use prescription medication? What type of drugs do you use? When was the last time you took them? We're looking for drug use, alcohol use, all that kind of stuff, because we're trying to verify the witness. When they go to court, they're going to be attacked for those very things, and so we're trying to close off those avenues right off the front. Then we start getting into it. We've had to work with other organizations investigating paranormal cases, just to ask them, what questions do you ask specifically for, say, a UFO case? And then we spent a lot of time going out at our own expense and buying and creating basically a whole library to read and study what the theories were, and what the other we call them researchers have to say about it. The researcher is somebody who reads a lot of books and goes to a lot of libraries and then becomes an expert on the subject, and then they write about it. Whereas we're on the other side of that spectrum, experiencing a lot of this stuff firsthand. So that's.
Have you ever had to put charges up on a Bigfoot?
We'd like to in some cases, but it's a real difficult proposition to serve them any papers.
Yes.
Threatening, intimidation. Yeah, there's
Noise pollution.
trespassing.
Trespassing.
Picking sheep.
Littering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like a little mafia.
Yeah.
Come and shake you down for a sheep.
Yeah. So we, our first major case was the one that you saw in the Netflix episode, which was the along the San Juan River. We had about 30 people that actually had witnessed a Bigfoot at different times along the river. The community as a whole got together and went to the local police department. The lieutenant there talked to the press and was quoted as saying, laughing, ha, 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 I wonder how much these people have had to drink, which didn't do very well for community relations. No. And so the community basically said, we want nothing to do with them. They contacted the Rangers Department, and we sent a team of 6 officers to that location for 3 days and 2 nights with getting the statements from everybody, trying to contact witnesses, and actually at night doing surveillance work with night vision and with forward-looking infrared systems to look for heat signatures. And then during the day actually getting in and busting brush in the Tamaris and looking for evidence. And we came out with foot track evidence and with hair evidence.
So, did you send the hair evidence back for DNA investigation?
Yes, we did. It got sent to a lab, and it came back as unknown carnivore, is all they could determine. Now, the interesting thing there is that if you look at, they do have a national or an international database for DNA. And they have animals from all over the world. So, a lot of people will say, oh, this is obviously a gorilla from Africa. That's not possible because it would have matched up with the DNA of any known species. Yeah. So there is a repository for all that kind of stuff, and it didn't match anything. All they could tell was unknown carnivore.
So in your view of investigating various Bigfoot events, what is your view of what they might be, your suspicion?
Both me and Stan have had extensive conversations between ourselves and with Michele. We think that these are pan-dimensional or multi-dimensional beings that pop into our dimension, and maybe there's something here that they want, and then they leave, which tells me that they can manipulate dimensional gates. I've actually had natives up in Washington State tell me that they actually saw Bigfoot and were watching him sitting down, hiding behind a tree, looking at them, and he just faded from view and disappeared. So
I had a very similar experience on a horse farm in Seattle, Washington. We were inside the horse barn and taking pictures And then on the outside of the window was a Bigfoot around 15 feet tall, and we're taking pictures, and we didn't notice it to the end, but then it regularly started appearing and being friends with the horses. The horses would make a certain kind of noise, and we knew it was around, and it would regularly make a calling noise because where I live, we're just surrounded by horses, sheep, llamas, and it was like a protectorate of that area. But it would use high energy places to pop in and out.
I saw that
Uh,
photo,
and- and
Andrew. You shared it.
yeah, like
actually.
it could be here and then 7 miles over there, and you could hear it calling from over here, and then within minutes calling from over there, and it was talking to itself.
Yeah, the other evidence that supports that theory is that me and Stan have spent our entire careers, which span, 61 years, and we have never come across the bones of a Bigfoot or the scat or anything else. And it would have shown up. It
Right,
would have been
naturally.
reported to us, and we would have gone out and seen it.
No bodies.
No bodies.
Have you ever
And
We
got
could
any
go out.
noises?
We
Have you ever
could
got
go
any
out,
noises?
even where I'm at right here. We could go out hiking a mile from here, and within that trek, we could see all kinds of evidence of coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions, these kind of things that live within that range of environment. You'll see where it beds down and dens, or just like you said, the scat, or where it's traveling to hunt and eat or drink water on a regular basis. But you don't see that with these Bigfoot. And if you had a 1,000 pound being, or it would be leaving scat that would be very obvious within that environment that it lives in, and you just don't see it. I mean, John and I have lived in the woods at times on different assignments, and we just don't see the evidence of that. So
Do all the Bigfoots look the same from your witness statements and from what you've seen? Or do they
uh,
vary in colour or height or
they
size?
I
vary in all different aspects. Color, the colors of the hair. Some are red, some are dark or even black. Some have white streaks on them. Some are real small, like our size. Others are 7 foot, 7.5 foot, even 8 foot. Um, Stan, go ahead.
Well, you look globally, and this phenomenon, I think that it's all tied together, where you have your Yowie down in Australia, you have the Yeti in some areas, and in the United States, obviously the Sasquatch and Bigfoot. You have down in Florida, the swamp ape and different things. And really, I feel these are in some way related. These are they're described many times very similar, and it's the same with what people refer to as even a skinwalker. Like I said earlier, many tribes in the United States, and even First Nations people in Canada, have a term or a reference to whether it's some type of a being that is very similar in description. The shape shifting thing, there's a number of different terms throughout the world where people are describing something similar, and or you get into in Europe lycanthropy and wolfmen or these kind of things. So I think that's one thing we'll elaborate on further into this discussion, is that John and I really developed this concept that all of this stuff that people refer to as supernatural or paranormal is interrelated. I had a haunting case where I had these coins that would materialize out of thin air, and I myself witnessed at least 10 times this phenomenon where out of nothingness, out of thin air, a coin will, what they refer to as a port, will appear out of thin air and fall on the floor. Well, that phenomenon got us to really open our eyes and realize there's more to the phenomenon, these phenomena, than what we can ever imagine. And like with the Bigfoot, we feel these things are crossing over into our physical world that we live in this time and space we're in now from somewhere else. And from time to time, they'll come and go, just like spirits, haunting cases.
Can I just share you an experience I had? So this reminded me of about 7-8 years ago. I had a fire ceremony outside and we had lots of people around us. And as I was calling in the direction, the Yeti kept coming in. And for some bizarre reason, I decided to film the fire towards the end of the ceremony and I had it on record. And towards the end, when it was about to stop, you heard this voice come in and go, oh, like really clear as day. And there was nothing around the fire. There was nothing could have made that noise. And I was like, Yeti. It came in at the end and made this bizarre multi-dimensional noise. I was like, holy fuck. It just triggered a memory then as you were talking about it.
Right.
So I got the trans-dimensional journey and process. So do people ever get taken to their realm and come back?
I'll let John talk about some of that. I think he has some understanding.
Yeah, we've actually been working with David Pilates, and we're with the Missing 411 series, and people there are disappearing, and in some cases their voices are still heard calling for help. But they're not to be found. And we think, this is just supposition on our part, but it's supported by some evidence that there are portals that are go into other dimensions. Now, if you look at string theory and this idea of dimensional gates, it proposes that there could be as many as 10 or 12 dimensions or an infinite number of parallel dimensions. And the thing to understand is that these are not side by side. They exist one on top of the other. So we're taking up the same space, but on a different frequency and dimensional plane as other people. In the Navajo,
the reality has got many layers stacked on top of each other.
Right. And so we're coexisting.
Each can be an individual layer upon itself with its own infinite expression. But there are certain places, whether you call them high energy places, portal places, where beings that can manipulate their own field can go from one layer to another.
That's right. And we think that in the case of Bigfoot, this is something that they can do. They can travel this way. We look at the UFO phenomenon, and a lot of these craft seem to pop into existence. I've actually had people describe a loud pop where the sound just travels through your body like a physical blow, and they look up and there's a craft sitting above them. And then after maybe 30 minutes or so, it'll as it's traveling, it'll fade away and disappear. And this is why we haven't, we see them, but we can't catch them. And some of them are traveling so fast that there's no hope that you're going to see it because our eyes just aren't designed to see something that quick.
If you go back into history and you look at different cultures and even indigenous peoples, many of them will have these creation stories like the Navajo people. The Dene or Navajo, they describe in their creation story or origin story that the beings traveled through a reed into different worlds. And basically what they're describing there is more or less different dimensions with different features within those worlds. The beings may be different from one level to the next. But John and I surmise that that's what's going on, is that in these creation stories, that's what they're basically talking about, is coming through different layers or different dimensions into this physical world that we're in now.
You're muted, Andrew.
So I believe it's the Apache have the ant people that bring them up from the subterranean realms, and the Cree something very very similar. They were nurtured in the bosom of the England, but they came from somewhere else, and they were brought here by a variety of different beings that you can still see in the cave art, or
Right.
the different wall arts that are out there.
Well, Andrew,
Yeah.
we have that in the Navajo lore. Our religion as well is that the ant people came from the underground and during a cataclysmic event that happened to the native peoples and were brought down underground. That's part of the steps to the creation story of the Navajo. So you're correct in that.
So when it comes to the investigating process, being police officers, police trained, and having to adapt and create unique techniques, what are some of the unique evidences that you've come across that will kind of put hairs up people's spines?
Well, early on, we were investigating a case where an elderly man had observed an object encircling his home, and it was hovering near his home, and he observed some lights and what ended up being basically a description of a typical gray alien that came in and around, was wandering around his yard, shining these what could be described similar to a laser, different colored lasers. They were shining on the ground. And in that particular case, John and I had reached out to the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, that was located in Phoenix, Arizona. And so we began discussing with them how their investigative techniques and what it is in their processes, what they go through to be able to capture information. And so really that was the initial contact with an outside entity. And that led to John and I conducting the presentations that John and I do to this very day at different conferences. We're getting ready to do one out at what's called Contact in the Desert in California at the 1st of June. And really that's what led to that. But John can describe more in actual techniques of what it is, we're trying to capture and document with that, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a really unique journey. We have adapted a lot of things. It's so interesting because when you see a UFO or a UAP or however our governments are calling them these days, the thing that gets me is that people that saw the Phoenix lights fly over. There's a couple of gals that I spoke with up in McMinimus, and they said that they stood there and watched this thing at a very low altitude fly over I guess you would classify it as the motorway outside of Phoenix, and they're watching this thing. Everybody pulled their cars over and stopped and watched it. When it was over, they all stood there. Nobody asked each other, "Did you see what I saw? Did you just see that?" They just all quietly got back in their cars again and drove off. And we see this over and over in these type of cases. People have cameras in their hands and they don't think about taking a picture. I don't know if it's just the shock of seeing something like that. But in Stan's case, if you want to talk about creepy, we saw the hitchhiker effect, where this phenomenon actually followed him home and kept manifesting. He had an alarm clock that went off at 3 a.m, and so he shut it off. It's one of these cheap ones that you get at that are given away. He shut it off. It came back on a little later. He shut it off again. This time he was ticked off enough, he pulled the batteries out of it and set it back down. And after another 10 minutes, it went off again with no
Somebody
batteries
wanted
to run
talk.
it. Yeah. So, some really strange things happen. And I've been followed by a UFO for about 40 miles, maybe 30 miles, I guess, and over a period of 40 minutes. And it was right behind my vehicle at 2 a.m. And it just followed me, and then it veered off and went up, and it was green. It was a round ball about the size of a basketball, and it went up on a mesa top and turned red. And that was the only time I ever felt uneasy that something was not right, and maybe I shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that uneasy feeling
One of
is quite uneasy, isn't it? And the cognitive dissonance that you were talking about has always amazed me. I've had lots and lots of interactions with UFOs and of various descriptions, types and expressions, and that part of it always amazes me. How I've had a string of UFOs that went on for about an hour and a half, one after another above my house, which is in a regular town with a main road next to me, lots and lots of traffic. And I'm standing there just looking up, and not a single person looked up. I've had other times where I've been at a party and a ship flew really low, and they did that power up thing where you see it coming and it's small, and then all of a sudden it will really glow as it comes over, and then it will go back down, and everyone looked up, and then they carried on with their conversations, and that was that. It was like it never happened.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that some people are obviously more sensitive to various paranormal phenomena than others. I think John and I, over the years that we've been dealing with this, I think you become more in tune to some phenomenon and or maybe more ready to be able to document things. So I think there's that element. Although I think there's also an element where maybe these things don't want to be seen. Maybe they don't want to be documented, or in the case of EBEs or extraterrestrial things, it's been suggested that sometimes when these things make contact with humans, they're deliberately causing that person or a human being to see some other form of image, whether it's a deer or a rabbit or something of that nature, an owl. So it's something that's within their environment. They may in some way look differently, different colors, different variations, different size, but in some way it's altering. I've heard the same thing with like these Bigfoot entities, that they're able to manipulate what humans
They
perceive,
can
I guess.
select who and what sees.
Yeah. So it's a two-way conversation. That's what lots of people think, that we're just happening upon these things, but there's a two-way conversation. Like you say, you're tuning into these phenomenon, or this phenomenon are tuning back into you at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah, one of the things that we found is that in Navajo culture, you're taught as a small child that Bigfoot does exist. He's around you. But one of the interesting things that they say is that never look at it in the eyes, because if you do, it can take control of your mind. And we don't know if it's using infrasound that we can't detect. Um, we've got stories that go back to the 1600s when Navajos first got horses, and they say they roped one with horsehair lariats, and it sat down between them when they roped it, and it spoke to them in their own language. And
Wow.
I can't, for the life of me, I can't think how this could be a vocalization. I think that it used some form of telepathy to speak to them, because it told them, if you take me up to the Mesa Verde area, I will not come back this way again. And so they took it up there and released it. But you have stories like this that, and maybe there's a reason that they say don't look at it in the eyes, because you might be able to hear it communicating with you.
The same thing is often said with contacts related to extraterrestrial, where these things are communicating telepathically, to humans and among themselves too. So, I think that's an interesting part of both
And
of
that
those
mind control element as well. I had a contact where the ship came very, very close, and had the telepathy, the speaking, and once I got outside and the ship came very close, naturally my body went into a state of shock, and I was asking for this experience, but it went into a state of shock, and it got to the point where it was actually I was getting very, very fearful, and then I just really don't remember much after that. I think I just kind of, when I was outside as well, I just kind of nodded down, and I must have walked into the house, gone all the way upstairs and gone into bed, completely unbeknown to myself. It's like it just took over my mind.
Yeah,
for preservation purposes.
It's like a telehypnotic suggestion.
Yeah.
That if you had reached in the state of fear where it would have been damaging not only to you but to them too, from your own fear projections.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talking back to what you said, Andrew, about it changing. So about 4 years ago, I went for a walk with my wife, Gabrielle, and we were not drinking, not doing any drugs or anything. We decided to lay on a bench near a shopping place. We laid down, and all of a sudden I got like a knowingness to look at this one star. So I looked at this star for about 15 minutes of just staring at it. Then it changed and appeared into a mothership. So it decided to show itself, and it started forming into two separate bits. Then I saw hundreds of crafts coming in and out, and I looked at Gabrielle and I was like, "Are you fucking seeing this?" And it changed from a star and allowed us to see what it was. And it took a while for it to do it, and I was like pinching myself, like, "Is this fucking real? It's real."
Did she see that when
she saw it as well? We were both looking at each other and we're like, "You're seeing this, aren't you?" And it was a star, and I just said, "Let's just look at this one, this bright star." And as I was looking into it for about 15-20 minutes, it just changed, and the star went into two parts, and there was just crafts going in and out of it. And I was just like, "Are you seeing this, Gabrielle?" And she's like, "Yeah, I see it." And we had that like special moment together where we saw something fucking crazy. Couldn't take a photo of it because my camera couldn't pick that shit up. So I was like about to take a photo, but it just looked like a blur, really.
Going back to what you brought up regarding investigative techniques related to the paranormal, one thing I know is that, like with the haunting cases where you're using a digital recorder, I do know that in some instances you'll have an individual, an investigator, maybe there's several there in a certain space during a haunting case where one investigator will hear vocal, something saying something. Yet you can have somebody standing right next to them that's not able to hear that. Mm-hmm. Yet when you go back, and if you're recording using a digital recorder, it's able to process that audio sound and capture that a lot of times more clearly than what even the original person that heard it, much clearer than what they heard. So,
yes.
So I think the reliance a lot of times, especially in this day and time, using a lot of the different electronic equipment uh, is important, because I think it allows one, like visually, you're able to see and capture images and things in various wavelengths that you may not even be visible at your own, naked eye, being able to capture something that's there. And I think even with the UFOs and the objects like that, you've seen some evidence that's come from like Mexico and place where they'll use the technique of having a standard digital camera on one side and then an infrared camera on the other, and they're able to actually capture much more or stuff only using the infrared
Yes.
spectrum and stuff. So John and I are very interested in that aspect. John's gotten more into the studies of Nikolai Tesla in regards to frequencies, modulation, and all of those different factors related to this kind of thing, and very interesting stuff.
Can I ask, when you're on an investigation, all three of you, and sometimes bits are missing that you can't put together, does anything come to you in your dream time? In your dreams, do you ever get any messages or things come up that help you on the investigation?
I'll answer that question. The answer is yes. I had an incident. I was working up in the Uinta Basin, and just by chance had gotten a visitation from an entity, and took 24 to 26 pictures. I think it was 26. And we immediately went to the ranch house and put it in a computer, and we had caught an 8 to 10 foot entity, reptilian species. And as we were going back to witness, again, the photos, they had wiped out black. And for some reason, the first time we were going through those photos, I captured on my own, cell phone camera, just took a picture. Something just told me, you better take a picture. And there were two other witnesses with me, and we had caught this entity, and it was coming towards us. And then when we went back and everything was wiped out black, we were very disappointed because we thought we had the find of the century, catching a reptilian species on camera.
Mm-hmm.
Well, lo and behold, I went home and started rummaging through my photos and came across this photo, and there it was, the face and the huge eye of the entity that we had caught on the other camera. And it started to, day by day, morph into something different. And it was losing its effect of being reptilian, and it started to reveal a woman's face, a beautiful, beautiful face. And what I did was I took it to some specialists, and they said, yeah, we find this phenomena the same with our cameras. We take things with the digital format, and with technology, they manipulate it and they wipe out because they don't want anybody to know their existence except for underground. So one evening, lo and behold, I just had this dream, and this woman came to me, and she said the reason why we look the way we do and we look menacing is because these are biomechanical suits. And so she wanted to reveal to me that the atmosphere is so dense for this species that she has to wear one of those. She told me similar to what you wear with NASA, the astronaut program. Now, that was a very foretelling dream for me, and I thought it was very interesting. So I'm also going to be a participant and a speaker at Contact in the Desert, and I will be telling this story. But what's so amazing to me is, how many dreams that we just pass off to dreams, or I'm having a delusion. I too do not use, substances, but I think in so many ways, our dreams can tell us that we're also being contacted. We talked about mind, manipulation, and Jonathan spoke about the Bigfoots, taking over our mind. But today, there's also technology and programs out there. And I don't want to get into the dark stuff that that the military has used in the ESP realm. So
Yes.
that's my
I've been on the wrong end of that
with
myself.
Yeah.
Just the reaching out process. At the beginning of the days, before I had any shamanic practices behind me that safeguarded the way I operate, it was very much just a free-for-all. So, I was opening up to these, asking for these beings to come and contact me, and they did. And of course, the ones that are going to contact you first probably don't have your best interest at heart, because the other guys are not going to
exactly
wish you any harm.
Well, I think in different cultures, you look throughout history, dreams have played a huge role in relation to what we're talking about here.
Yes.
And a lot of it is speculation and unknown. But there again, if you look at paranormal in general, there's so much more to all of this that we don't know. We're simply at the tip of the spear, so to speak,
Yes.
to try to learn and investigate. And that's why I think it's critical that we do what you guys are doing right here, where you're bringing together a forum of people that have certain skill sets to be able to come in and share information, and in general share it with the public. So we all together collectively learn more and more and more,
And the dream space for me really was, it's where contact began. I mean, there was contact as a child, but as an adult, a contact, first of all, this is how they let me know that they were benevolent. This particular group was by coming into my dreams, sharing an experience, a love-based experience in a dream, and then contact ensued in various other dimensions.
And see, for me, I got introduced to entire Dreamtime societies. Societies that were dreaming, I call them dreaming nations from previous histories. One of them were the Dreamers of the Southern Skies. They were generally Ute, Arapaho, and some Cree, and it was a female-led dreaming organization that would try to connect to future ancestors. So they were looking for people being reborn in the cycle in which they could communicate and reteach parts of their culture that was going to be lost from the variety of oral teachers and historians who were going to be lost to the waves of time, the forgotten time aspect in the Great Destructions. And being introduced to the different societies like that, you realize there's hundreds, if not thousands, of Dreamtime societies spread all over the indigenous world.
Well, I can tell you a story about a dream. I don't know how many of you have had experienced deja vu, but I've experienced it all my life. And typically I'll have a dream, and then later on I'll flash and go, oh, I dreamed about this, even though I've never been to a particular place before. And sometimes I just sit back and I just watch it unfold, and usually last a few seconds. In this case, I was on my way back from work, and I had a 125-mile drive one way to get to and from work. And on my way, I'm going in an area called Cornfields, and just south of Bittahoche Junction, or I should say Burnside Junction. And I'm on Navajo Route 15, driving about 65 miles an hour. The sun's going down, and there's this little place where there's a wash. So for about a quarter mile, the road dips down and then goes flat and then comes back up again. And when I dipped down into that, I flashed right then, and I remembered in my dream I had hit a herd of horses. and my truck was upside down, my patrol unit, and I was hanging from my seatbelt, thinking to myself, how am I going to explain this? And as I thought about that, I let off on the accelerator. As I let off, a herd of horses ran in front of my truck, and I could see in the mirror the other part of the herd ran directly behind my truck. There was about maybe 25 horses altogether, just galloping. And I hit that dead space right in between them perfectly and came out on the other side. And I'm, of course, I'm breathing heavy and, going, oh man, I just missed that.
Yeah.
The idea that I have now is that in these dream states, it's kind of like sliding down a half a tube, and you can move. You're still going in the general direction that you're supposed to be going, but there is movement to each side that you can take. And in that case, I was able to manipulate that to my advantage unknowingly, just by letting off the accelerator when I did. So,
which was its own unique divine synchronistic timing that
that's
had a
right.
vision in which you would have hit the herd of horses, and at the same time it was a form of a deja vu while you were driving in that driving hypnotic state. See,
Right.
I see that as a deep form of precognition, and if you had not chose to let off the gas, you would have hit the horses.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So
And
it was
I
a
know that for a fact.
timeline going on there. Yeah.
And belief, somebody may have missed that opportunity.
Wow.
I think that happens all the time. Like
Well,
Stan said,
dream,
we're not
yeah.
aware.
Yeah.
Well, our dream states are very much of our part of our culture too. Native Americans were given their visions through the dream state, and that's why today we have the dream catcher to catch the negative dreams that come into our lives that we hang above our beds or wherever in the rooms that we live in. And it's just fascinating to me that we don't talk about the state of being within our own culture, that we're having these manifestations of outer world visitations, and yet we don't talk about the dream states within the Native American cultures that once were so prevalent amongst the elders. And they would talk to us. I had a dream about your life or about my life, or for the community and the tribe, and then they would recount that dream to the community, and then everybody could either live by that as a metaphor, as a warning, according to what Jonathan was talking about. It was a forewarning for
Yes.
him.
Yes.
We have
Yeah.
missed that within our culture. I
Yeah.
think that's going away. So, as part of, we call it the medicine. That's part of our medicine.
Yes. We
Yeah.
still have that in my family, my nuclear family, my children and so forth. Dreams are discussed because, we trust in them.
Yeah.
They're important. I'd like to ask a question, if I may, and Andrew, I'll put it to you first. There's one phenomenon that I see quite a lot over the internet, and it's something that really does put the heebie-jeebies in me. There's something, the ghouls, Andrew, like in Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
the ghoul. There's a version of that around the United States, isn't there? Because I've seen many videos. So it's probably what you guys call the skinwalker. I don't know, but it's like a hairless humanoid that walks on all fours, and it
A rake?
a rake,
A rake?
yeah, and they
Yeah.
they make very animalistic, throaty noises.
Yeah. I think
I've
that
seen,
I think that and the Skinwalker, and other references, uh, that they're
Dogman.
interrelated in some way. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
are.
what's your take on that,
Very.
Andrew? What are they?
So to identify it as one single species would be very difficult.
Okay.
Right.
But their grander purpose is, why are they in a reality?
Mm.
I believe the majority of them are what I call energetic predators. They look for an energy in a place that will attract other high frequency beings and they predate or use that as a territory in which they will harvest energy, fear-based energy, adrenaline-based energies off of things in that particular territory, which also fuels shape shifting for them.
So that's different to the
When
ghoul.
generally when they're on all four, well, the Saudi Arabian ghouls are different. They're more of an undead frequency versus a living frequency, like the rake.
Can you say that word again? The Saudi Arabia,
The
what
ghoul.
your ghoul?
Ghoul. Yeah, Ghoul.
Is that something towards a reefer? You know, the death god of
So they
that
are
comes into.
beings that have died and that were
Okay.
reanimated through ancient magic deep under the lands. Magic that has gone wild. Ancient Babylonian, ancient Mesopotamian magics that no longer have priests guiding it to a reality. And it goes wild and it reanimates dead beings or things that are there, and they live in the subterraneans. You'll have many Marines that talk about the battles in Baghdad with them.
Yeah.
The same in Kuwait and the same in Afghanistan too.
They feed on
They
the
have
dead
their
and eat the bone marrow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
One
Well,
of
you
the
know, this
questions
question
that
oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
one of the questions you asked us earlier is something that kind of creeped us out. Um, I think we need to be uh, pretty upfront here that when me and Stan go into these investigations, we use the term that can you look at a situation without naming it? Naming it, making it a word causes fear. So we don't name these situations. We go in, we have our protection that we have done, and we just go into it with no expectation of what we're going to find. And unfortunately, if we had a camera crew with us, you wouldn't see us jumping and screaming and reacting. We have these things happen to us. We experience these things, but we don't react to them because we've known for a long time, especially with haunting cases, that if you show fear, it can feed off that and
Yes.
it can manifest even more.
Yes.
Yep.
And so we're not going to give it I mean, we both ended up with scratches on our bodies and our arms, being touched,
Yep.
things like that. But there's no fear there. And we just don't fall into that category. So we'd be pretty boring to be on with an investigation because we're more interested in documentation and actually getting the information
So
than
you
the
have
experience.
you have a state of neutrality that I call sacred neutral. You know that there's a sacred energy inside you that gives you a protection, and by letting go of all expectations, that neutral form and then the investigative neutrality amplifies your protection so they cannot harvest fear.
Yes.
When things start scratching you, they've already been on a feeding frenzy of other fears. And they don't need fear from humans. They can have fear from the deer, the blades of grass, all sorts of things. It's a matter of how much this being has learned to harvest fear. And that's how they become stronger and stronger predators. They've learned dozens or hundreds of ways of just harvesting basic fear from the television show that's giving you the boo scare. Okay, many of them have figured out how to just harvest energy off of the negative things that just happen in the background.
Mm.
But then there are the ones that become apex predators, and they enjoy doing that. Okay, there is when you're running into something that has to be stopped somehow.
Yeah.
Is that what you would call a demon, Andrew?
Yes.
So, to me, the only difference between a demon and a ghost is how many ways they know how to harvest your energy, get inside you, fool you, trick you. It's the tricks that they've learned, and the older they become, the more tricks that they learn. And obviously, with age comes wisdom. So, yes,
Mm.
and you could take
And
the
then,
religious limitations out of the demon and just put in earned and learned ways of harvesting energy.
And I guess the more underlings they have under them as well, feeding and passing it back.
It's like
Well,
a
I
mafia
think
system. They tithe.
I think that the other thing is that with some of the haunting cases, you're dealing with an entity that was a former human being. I mean, it is
Yes.
the spirit of a actual person that once lived. And with some of the cases involving demonic activity, these may be entities that were never actually a physical human being. They've manifested either within some other realm or other dimension or something of that nature, yet
Mhm.
are doing like what you talked about, where they're actually feeding on energy of human beings.
Yeah. And they come here for their territorial grounds. Now, a lot of humans who have become evil beings in their living time can become predatory entities who will not cross over.
Yeah.
They
I
go through a
love the
spiritual transformation.
Andrew.
Go ahead,
I
Michelle.
love the narrative that Jonathan and Stan stand by, because most times when they're out or I'm out and investigating, and people, the first thing they want to do is talk about the skinwalker lore. And have you seen one? Has it ever come into your life? And I'm going to say honestly, I've only seen the shadows of one, because I don't want that part in my life. To me, it's like that negative energy that it feeds on. And so if I
Yes.
call it in, that's the other thing. Navajos don't like calling it in. Natives don't like calling in those dark energies. And
No one
so
would.
Nope.
and so it's gotten a lot of popularity on a lot of shows talking about the skinwalker. But the point that we're trying to make is, let's investigate without the fear and resolve, what is this? What are we dealing? Mythical lores that have been going on for thousands of years in our culture, not only our culture in the world with other indigenous cultures, and start interacting with the evidence of extraterrestrial life, or things that are more highly developed than what we have here, and start to understand it rather than fear it.
I
And the
wouldn't
more you
necessarily say no one, because there are people within our societies that want to invite that and entertain it into their own lives for whatever reasons. Just like what you have with, let's say, Satanism and people who practice satanic beliefs and rituals and those kind of things. There, I would say that, yeah, in some instances, there are people. John and I have met with individuals who claim to have practiced skinwalker uh, uh, changing. And John can elaborate a little more on that. But uh, yeah, I think it's something for us. It's it's very interesting. It's a very interesting subject matter, but you also have to be very careful in dealing with that information and subject matter, because these things can affect you. They can deliberately uh,
Oh,
target you and
yes.
Right.
stuff. So
Yes. What you look at looks back at you, is what Andrew always
Mm-hmm.
says.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
with that, hold on real quick. These investigations you do help demystify the fear. And it can take away the many ways they can harvest fear. Even if it's a basic investigation that leads to a logical conclusion, they harvest fear. And by coming
John and
into a
I have
story,
been John and I
go
have
ahead.
been targeted and attacked because of that. Because some
Yeah.
of these entities, they hide in the shadows. They work on a realm, where they don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be known, and that's a part of the Navajo witchcraft. And you can actually confront that individual that's practicing that to their face and to their name, and it's
Yep.
said that person can lose their life within like 4 days or something. So yeah, they don't want to operate. They don't want people finding out. So at times we've been attacked by bringing, like you said, demystifying some of this
Yes.
stuff.
Taking away their power of mystery and fear.
Yeah, one of
Somebody
the things
wrote.
that
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Jonathan.
Oh, I was
I
going
was
to
gonna
say
say.
one of the things that we look at is that traditionally in Navajo culture you have something that's called Hojo, or it's the beauty way. It's a philosophy of looking at life, and it says that there is a balance. So you have me and Stan always talk about this. There's negative energies and there are positive energies. Uh, because of our view of life, a lot of us are brought up in Christianity, in churches, uh, whatever denomination you are, you start thinking in terms of good and evil.
Yes,
Um,
polarity.
but the Navajo look at it as positive energy, negative energy, and there's a balance. It's up to you to have a social responsibility to go one direction or the other.
You can't
And
have one without the other.
yeah,
Throughout
yeah,
the universe, there's both sides of that.
it's always going to be there, and it's a
And all of the
balance,
shades of middle grey in between.
right? So your mission in life, so to speak, is to have that balance. And when you become imbalanced, when one takes over, the negative side, then you go to a ceremony and that balance is restored through that ceremony, whether it's an enemy way ceremony or a night way ceremony. Um, that's the reason for them, because the medicine man is going to restore the balance that you lost. So it's really easy because we see things through a glass of our own making.
Yes.
And sometimes religion comes into that. Everybody's looking for answers. And, but like I said, we look at it as negative and positive.
And you see that with the UFO phenomenon where each culture has their own version of it, and they will, what's the word I'm looking for, translate it the way that they have in their culture or their conditioning. The Orientals called them dragons, and there's many different cultures have different descriptions of what these are.
So have you
question-
or any of your witnesses? Sorry, Michele. Do you want to go ahead, Michele? Because
She's been waiting to talk for a while.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Ask the question.
okay, I just wondered whether you or any of your witnesses had. Now I've forgotten the question.
I'm so sorry.
Oh no!
Brain fart.
Have ever seen anything or described something that doesn't fit into any of these categories? Something really weird or new, or doesn't fit into
That's a good question.
like a skinwalker or any of the other categories?
Yeah, I have. I'm just because I'm an investigator. We come across some pretty interesting stories as we've investigated up in the Uinta Basin. I've been up there 6 years investigating. Actually, I started up there on an agricultural project. I wasn't interested in the ufology, the paranormal realm, and it was kind of blessed upon me. And whether the veil is really thin for myself, I started to have all these experiences, and I couldn't deny it after having all these things happening and occurring in life. And I have experienced it all. um, it's what's really interesting that's out of the norm is when entities start to show up, the positive and the negative ones. For some reason, my higher spirit couldn't handle the negative ones. It's just like a discernment. But now I'm having all these wonderful interactions with the positive entities that are coming, and I've not yet been able to communicate with them. There seems to be a block. But just their mere appearance has got me into the intrigue. And there's a communication trying to go on between us, and I just haven't had that opportunity to go in and find out what's on their mind. Or maybe it's just knowing that they exist, maybe all that I'm going to be told through these investigations. And we've talked today about the Bigfoot, seeing that one, remember the smell of what they smelled like. I mean, this realm is very interesting, because the thing I always ask, is it them or is it us? Because our technology is we're at a very developed technological part of life. And now we got to start, okay, did they come down and share their technology? We've developed it. Is it them or us? So, maybe I skirted around a little bit around your question, but yeah, I think it's all unusual, because, if you don't live in the mainstream, this is considered a fringy topic.
Yeah. in my own. Sorry, go ahead, Del.
Could I ask a question? Have you got any noises of Bigfoot or a Yeti before? Any sound at all? What could have been them?
Have I heard the sounds? No, I haven't. These gentlemen
yeah.
probably have. I smelled them around. I'll never forget, on a project I was up in the Uinta Basin on a different ranch. But I mean, that odor, I'll never forget it. It was. I wish I had heard the sound. Now, I may have, on an investigation last year, I took up a young lady with me who's a friend of mine. We're both investigating different things, and it was interesting. It's like all of nature, the birds, everything, the sound went away. And as we were walking down the path off a particular another ranch that I'm working with, it's almost sounded like a moose. I don't know. That's the only description I have of it. That we both looked at each other and thought, is that a Bigfoot noise? It almost has that sound of a moose. I mean, that's the only description I have of the sound.
Yeah. I've heard things growing up in Oklahoma, where me and a relative would be out in the woods at night and hear things that we're not able to identify as the normal animals that are known within that region. So there is that. But I have John and I have a good friend, Brenda Harris, that we work with, who is from the Farmington, Bloomfield area. She does investigations related to Bigfoot, and so she does. Matter of fact, we were talking this morning about that very thing, and she does have audio of sounds of things that she says are related, or these things that people call Bigfoot. So yeah.
Wow.
I saw the most
Has
incredible videos
once. Has she ever described it? Stan, has she ever described the noise, or anybody has ever heard it even here today? Have you? Can you describe that sound? It's a howl.
Well, I just like what he just now said. I've heard it from descriptions sounding like a howl all the way through grunts and things similar like what you've described as either a moose or an elk, these kind of things. But having either different tonalities to it, either higher or lower, or that makes it, that differentiates it from these other animals that are within that environment. So yeah, it'd be interesting, in going forward with our investigations, Michele, John, and I, when we actually get into the field and using specialized equipment to be able to, for ourselves, capture audio and be able to analyze it and that kind of thing.
Or play it back to them and call them back. So
Right.
I saw a collection of videos once that was absolutely fascinating, and I mean, obviously I knew it was real, but one of the things for people if they were disbelievers was the fact that this guy was not trying to look for Bigfoot. He was not in any way, shape or form investigating anything. He lived in rural America and he was just recording his garden and the things that were going on, and he had big forests all the way around him, and every now and then you would hear them, but not just one, multiple, as if there was families there meeting and they were all howling as they came together. And this was right on the tree line of where his garden was, where his house was literally feet away from where this was going on. And the noise was unbelievable, and you could see the panic on his face as he took his children inside. And he began to put cameras on these trees where the noises were coming from, and we could see where there was disturbance on the ground. And in the morning when he went back, and the sound, he actually filmed it, and the sound was, there must have been 20 beings making these howling noises. And in the morning when he went to go and collect his camera, the camera had been removed, and what was left in its place was some twigs that had been formed into like the outside of a dream catcher, like twisted around twigs, just left right where his camera was. Which shows their appreciation for the fact that he was observing them, and some mutual respect between the two of them. Yeah, we appreciate that you've heard us and what you're trying to do, but unfortunately we can't do that. So here's a gift from us. It showed a benevolence.
Like I had mentioned earlier regarding the electronic voice phenomenon, where there was a woman's voice that sounded from within Scotland or that dialect or whatever. So if a human spirit can come across, then vocalize in our physical world and make those sounds, and it can be captured, then why couldn't these things that people refer to as Bigfoot do the same kind of thing, And like we said, like you referenced, multiple beings vocalizing and making sounds and stuff. So
what's your view on energetic clearing lands where there's been, let's say, negative entities coming through in portals? Is that something you will practice, or you think would be a good practice, or do you leave the lands alone?
Well, in my discussions with a good friend of mine that's a medicine man, we got on the discussion of, particularly on the Navajo reservation, Window Rock is the capital of the Navajo Nation. And there's a lot of haunting related phenomena in that region, in the different office spaces and stuff. And so we come along, we build our modern offices and buildings and structures, but like in Window Rock, when the Navajos were force marched to Bosque Redondo or Fort Sumner in the 1800s, there were a lot of loss of life. There were people that were killed. There were also other traumatic incidents. I'm sure there were women that were raped, girls that were raped. With those violent and negative incidents, that more or less stains those lands. And my discussion with this medicine man was that, yes, you can come in and use traditional techniques to bless those areas and to using certain techniques to suppress those energies. But according to him, you don't ever get rid of those energies, that they're there and they'll always be there. You may be able to cause it to calm down, to settle down, but in effect, you don't ever erase or get rid of what transpired there in that area. So
Do you think you
I
could
just
get
want to make that.
kickback if you did? Do you think there would be some sort of karmic retribution or kickback if you did do ceremony there, clearing ceremony? Is that possible?
It's
Well, I
Can I
think the
it's
difference.
always possible. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
Yeah.
they're one of the things that we found out is that, if you look at us, man in general, we are composed of energy, all the way down to our atomic structure, and they still don't know what kind of energy holds our atoms together. By we should be just flying apart. So we're all composed of energy. You can't destroy energy. Energy can be reconstituted in a different form, but it's never destroyed. And when you and I die, we like to say, oh, our spirits, float up with a little halo over the head and go up to the heavens. In some cases, it does. In some cases, it attaches to the nearest formation or object that's close by. And then we start to get what we classify as hauntings. And this energy could be thousands of years old. It could be hundreds of years old. It could be 2 weeks old. It just depends on what has happened there and where that energy came from. And so, that's how we view this, is that in these haunting cases, they're residual energy that's been left. And again, you can't get rid of it. You can't destroy it. You can suppress it for a time. And if the entity is strong enough, yeah, it'll come after you and let you know that it's not pleased. And we've seen situations like that too.
So in some of these haunting cases, you have these energies that are experienced. They're almost like a playback of a digital recording, like you would have like, let's say, an old cassette tape that you would have, and you could rewind it and it would play over. Others are more like an actual entity and or person that actively interacts with human beings.
Yeah.
So I think it varies, given the locale, what the actual event or incident that occurred. A lot of different variables that come into play in how it is that we encounter and we experience whatever is happening.
So I want to add my 2 cents here. I believe when there are energetic predators witnessing a tragedy, it will make a haunting long term. I do believe there are also short term hauntings
Yeah.
where things are trying to figure out where they belong after they've passed.
Yeah.
But in general, the level of trauma and imprint on the land will determine how it replays, if it's a conscious being of choice in another realm. And then when you add energetic predators harvesting the death energy of fear itself, you get a deeper imprint, such as the Trail of Tears,
Yes.
where absolutely energetic predators were following that entire journey.
Yes.
I would like to say this related to that. Where my home is situated, the I-40 or Interstate 40 is just like 200 yards to the south of where I live. And then to the north, maybe 150 yards, is the Santa Fe Railroad. Both of those entities, both of those structures cause a loss of life quite often. And so for where I live, right here, kind of in the middle, at times I'll experience spirit activity, I think, from people that lose their lives on both sides of these, and it'll be fleeting. It'll be, something that passes through my home or through this space, just like you said, temporarily. Um, Sometimes it may last a couple of days, but it can be like what you described. That spirit that's there is trying to find direction or where it's supposed to go or whatever.
And our light, whether we really realize it or not, can guide them. Our own
Right.
faith in our own self can be enough to remind them, I may not have a body now, but I can rely on my light, my faith, my connection, my frequency that provided me choice through will. And that choice through will can happen in the afterlife. And this is what can create a diversion with many different types of ghosts. Those that won't accept the religious transfer, the spiritual transfer to the other realms to become an ancestor or to have that full life review. Then there are those that are in such a state of confusion because energetic predators were there at the death moment, and that is the predator creating a field of cows where they will regularly go and harvest off of those beings, and they will make them their minions. Okay? So if an energetic predator is harvesting your death energy and it does 20, 30, 40 times, it'll have 40 things that it can get energy off of on a regular basis. So it'll never reach its starvation point.
Yeah.
Well, I find
With
it
some of these
interesting.
spirits,
Oh,
with some of these spirits, I don't think they know they've crossed over. They're in a state of where they don't even have that consciousness to know that they've died or they're on the other side.
I come across that quite often,
Yeah.
especially people that used to live in a house or have a relative that lived in a house, and then a new family will move in, and then the being will be walking around the house saying, "Get out of my house! Get out of my house!
Right.
Get out of my house!" I
Right.
come across this a lot, and
Right.
it's quite often they can be very, very aggressive towards the people in the house.
Aggressive.
But once I walk into the house, they calm instantly. And then once they can see that you can actually talk with them, and then they realize what they are.
well, I find it
and I was just
really
thinking,
interesting. I find it really interesting. Jonathan had referred to hitchhiker energy. And sometimes we can carry that from a place we've been and bring it to our home.
yes,
And we can actually open up a vortex within our own home if we're not aware
yep,
of the things that
shoes,
hitchhike on
keys,
the. Yeah, exactly. And working up in the Uinta Basin, when I was early on in the investigation, early on the projects I was working up there, I had this energy follow me home, and it at first was very terrifying because entities were coming along too, because I allowed the vortex to be open until I found ways to protect myself through a cleansing or, things that are spiritually based in our culture. But now I don't have that problem because I'm aware. So even when I visit the areas now that we do these investigations, I prepare myself spiritually so that I don't bring these entities home and I don't allow others to bring it home as well. So it's just a
yes.
learning aspect of being a part of this world, this unforeseen world, and experiencing it. A really interesting subject line.
And modern technology also plays a part in this, in my experience. I mean, if you have like Andrew was talking about, the scenario Andrew was talking about. I mean, I feel that there is energy can be alchemized. It's just obviously one medicine man is not going to do much again with 1,000 years worth of haunting. There's obviously going to need to be many medicine men over a long period of time that work on that part of the land. But if you've got a situation like that, and then you build a city on top of that, and you've got cars moving, you've got electricity, you have all other
Right.
kinds of alchemy that people don't know is alchemy, like alcohol, drugs, other forms of alchemy as well that's going on. You amplify that energy, and then you've got all these other beings that are living on top of that going on, and it's just a huge soup of energy that would be, it would just draw those kind of feeding predatorial entities in. It would be a free for all.
Like the big cities have an entire layer of ghosts that don't
Mm-hmm.
cross over, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And then you have predatory beings that are regularly making feeding zones and harvesting the car accidents and making it very difficult for people to cross over. And it's why an entire culture of visitations from loved ones who passed in car accidents have been created, because there's an entire other layer in society to those worlds where they haven't crossed over. And many of them were, exactly as we said before, were never human to begin with. But they're making their own territorial places. And
Mhm.
let's say you've got like a city like London or New York City or Los Angeles, where there have been dozens of wars over those capitals, and you have hundreds of years and thousands of deaths. The beaches of Normandy,
Yes.
Berlin, the invasion of Berlin, the firebombing of Dresden. Okay, and then you look at the Hawaiian Islands, who have their night walkers, who are a completely different type of entity that is clearly in a ghosty format, but it commands the land. Everything else is afraid of it. Even the predatory entities, when those walkers come out, they run.
Wow. Were they ever humans, Andrew, or are they something completely different?
The walkings in Hawaii, no,
Yeah.
they're projections from an ancient past.
Natural to Earth?
No, unnatural,
No.
completely unnatural. Technologically created.
Ah.
I remember when you talked about lifts, Andrew, and I've been to a lift a few times before, and I realised how many fucking ghosts around lifts waiting. So as I
That's
went
an
in, I was like,
elevator to all the
holy fuck,
Americans.
elevator, yeah, sorry. As I went to an elevator, we had a ghost show where we were talking about entities, and Andrew was talking about how these ghosts like to have go to elevators and kind of scan people. And after I went to a few elevators, I'm like, holy fuck, this is haunted.
Yeah.
And there was about 8 different beings. I was like, I see you, motherfuckers.
Same thing with bus
Interesting.
stops, taxi stops. They jump onto us and they ride us. They ride us on the energy. And are they harvesting you? Just a little bit, just enough so you won't notice. But then after a while, when you as a city person get used to it, it's no more than dust on your jacket. You don't notice it.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
think
mirrors as well,
people.
Andrew, right? Mirrors as well are portals.
Yes.
Everybody has mirrors all over their house, and this is a gateway in and out.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
I think people have in general, the idea that graveyards are a place of haunting and stuff. But
Yes.
really, yeah, there may be instances where you're encountering a spirit within a graveyard, simply because that spirit still has that attachment to that physical body that's buried there. But I think in general, the places like you've described, the train stations, the elevators, these things where the spirits regularly frequented, even homes,
Yes.
that's where you get more and more activity. And I think
Yes.
I've heard some figures up at the level at like trillions of human lives have actually lived on this little blue marble we're on.
Yep.
And if you take that into consideration, if that's possible, no matter where we go out through to our car, or we're walking on the remains of other human beings. And if you come to the realization that every one of those human beings had a life force, that had a soul or an energy, then we're going to encounter that wherever we go. And we tend to, because of fear, many times we'll encounter something, but we dismiss it or rule it as, oh, that was just the wind, that was just the house settling and these kind of things. And I think more often than not, it's not. It's actually where we're encountering some type of former energy and or spirit. And
Graveyards are one of the least haunted places I come across. One of the least haunted places.
I love graveyards.
I see them in the
would
stores.
agree.
Yeah.
I would agree.
They walk
If
past you in the
anything,
shops.
it's the worship energy that attracts them to go back there, or the religious ceremonies being performed that could help them potentially cross over. I want to add another little layer in here. Example: the New Orleans Hurricane Katrina. That city emptied out for the first time in 400 years, 380 years. a tremendous amount of ghosts crossed over because there weren't enough people in the city to feed them. Okay? You now have a brand new group of ghosts operating an old ancestral area that has all sorts of religious organizations of every thought, concept, and idea there. But whenever you get major natural disasters, like let's say the San Francisco earthquake, where you had 100,000 people die in an hour and a half, and another 300,000 die from sicknesses afterwards. What's in San Francisco? What's just underneath the surface of reality there? Once again, entire cultures of other layers of realities, which we call ghosts, but to them, they move on. They're still living. They're not ready to cross over to the other realms. They've accepted the reality of non physicality.
John and I worked with a director for the Netflix Unsolved Mysteries. His name is Clay Jeter, and he's done a number of films for Netflix and for Unsolved Mysteries. Excuse me. And he did one that's related to the spirit activity that occurred in and following the tsunami that recently occurred in Japan.
Yep.
And you see a very clear phenomena that has occurred because of that particular incident, where you get spirit activity, where there are spirits that, like I said earlier, that don't even know that they're gone, that they haven't crossed over. They're either taking a taxi or something like that. And I would highly recommend you watching that, because it's very interesting. And I think it sheds light in this phenomena where you get spirit activity when it was actually a human being that once was physically living and has crossed over, and they don't know they're gone. They don't know they're don't know they're dead.
I've seen that show you were talking about. And
Yeah.
to another little layer, there are many more things that are going on in Japan because their belief system is very different than here, and the background belief engine determines how prevalent things can be. In Japan, ancestors are real to them. They make regular offerings to them. And many indigenous cultures do also, but modern American culture does not. Okay? And when you have
Well,
a form of ancestral worship, you have a means of mitigating the uneasiness on the other side, which allows us to coexist with the many layers that are around us.
in Japan, you watch that show, you see that in Japan, culturally, they interact with spirits that have come and
Yes.
gone. And like with the Navajo culture over here, they won't even mention that person's name once they've gone, because there's that fear of attracting or bringing that spirit back into into their environment or their world. And so
In Africa,
it's
some
interesting,
places
the different cultures. Yeah.
they do.
Yep.
There's some in Africa. I saw one in Gabon, the Bwiti tribe, and I was watching a documentary about those guys. And there was a freak accident, and a mother and a baby died. And the baby was not of concern to them, but the mother was. The whole village came out all night long, and they burned fires, and they ran around the village, waving fire all over the place and screaming and shouting and calling to the ancestors, because they didn't want this woman's soul to hang around. So they were trying to chase out any of the beings from the unseen out of their village. Very aware of it. The whole village was involved.
You know what I find really
I do know. Go ahead, Michele.
What's really interesting to what you're saying is culturally, Stan just talked about, we don't call or name the persons who have died, but there are accounts of the medicine man or people on the reservation of the Navajo Nation that call in the ancient orbs. We believe that these are our ancestors, and they come to help us in our daily lives. And, for the first time when I was working on coming into this field of paranormal investigation and ufology, pseudoscience is what it's being known as. For the first time, I talked with my mother about, her childhood and some of these supernatural occurrences. And we never shared that growing up at all until I became a part of this paranormal study that we are doing up in the Uinta Basin. But it was really interesting that she would bring a cultural aspect to it and call in, saying that my grandmother would call in the orbs just to help us out, if there was a problem with their household. So there's another
And
component of it, that we can
mhm.
look at, like you said, the woman, brought was concerned and had the ceremony, and we kind of have some of the similar things.
and then there's
For
actual,
protective
and
for
then there's
protective
actual.
stuff,
Go ahead.
I for protective stuff, I do call upon, like you said, guardians, uh,
Mhm.
angels, things of that nature, uh, in my morning prayers and things like that. And I do have that interaction
Mhm.
from what I've been told by my spiritual person that guides me. He says there are these other entities like Native American elders that have passed on hundreds of years ago, but they're still
Mhm.
doing protective things for the living today. And so I think that goes along what Michele just said as far as the orbs. When it actually takes formation of an actual object, an orb, that spirit energy or whatever. I think we encounter those things at times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
one of the things that I was asked at a recent conference was, what can I do to protect myself? It was a generalized question from a non-Indian, and what I answered, and our stock answer, and I think it needs to be said, is that instead of copying Native American tradition, find out
Mhm.
what was done in your cultural background. What did your people do to protect themselves? And take that for your own. Um, the most important aspect of it is that you have an intent. If you're
Yes.
praying, you can pray to Jesus, you can pray through Mary, you can pray to God or the Creator. But the most important thing is the intent that you have in your prayer that this
Yes.
is going to protect you.
Belief.
And so I told him, I says, if you find something in your own cultural background that works, take it, utilize it, make it your own, and it'll be even more powerful for your purposes. We do have a lot of people that just copy what they see on the internet, and they look at Native Americans and they say, "Oh, these guys obviously know something, so I'm going to go through the motions." It's not about the motions; it's about the specific intent that you have to protect yourself.
and then the faith
I
you've got
agree.
connected to your daily practice. And a daily
Mhm.
practice is absolutely vital to growing your faith and connection to the otherworldly guardians, beings, guides. I want to add many cultures have ancestral worship that brings a balance to the home,
Yeah.
especially in India, even Afghanistan, even in the Muslim areas, an honoring of the ancestors, those that came to the previous 7 generation. We all stand on the shoulders of our grandmothers and grandfathers. We don't specifically need grandma, auntie this or grandma that to be there. It's the collective ancestors that come to us in the form of orbs, come to the forms of guardians, and when we regularly acknowledge them as a part of our layered reality, they can help balance a haunting in this reality because they can
Right.
be balanced from the other side. And ancestral prayer and ancestral worship is as ancient as time itself. Okay?
Yeah.
But there are also future ancestors,
Yeah.
which
Mhm.
are not bound to time. And that also is a form of paranormal haunting. People who decided this was going to be my future, and then that future never came. Okay? And then you run into very unique possessing space entities who will not let go of a potential future, even if it's 1,000 years later. Okay? Such as like Genghis Khan or Alexander the Great, who tried to get to this godhood level and have transcended time itself. Kukulkan, Khan, the Quetzalcoatl, the gods who have survived the ancient passings of time, who had cult worshippers in the millions during their time. And yet we still know their names today.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that I had to do archaeological investigations, which meant that I had to be at basket maker and Anasazi sites, people that had existed 500, 700, 900 years ago. And in going to these places, a lot of Navajos feared going to those places. They were told you stay away from there because the spirit can attach to you and you can bring it back. So one of the things that I did, I had to speak with different medicine men about how to comport myself at these locations, and to how to protect myself. And one of the things they said had always stuck with me and became almost a daily practice. And that's this idea of going to this place with respect. You don't go in, you don't kick the ground, you don't spit on the ground or pee on the ground. You go in with the respectful attitude that you're there to do a job, and so you have to be there, and you're just going to intrude for a momentary period of time, and it seems to have done good. And when you're doing protection, Stan always, I love the way he puts it. He says, like taking a bath. You don't go 2 weeks between taking a bath, or maybe if you do, hopefully everything's okay. But if it's like taking a bath, you do it every chance you get, because it's a spiritual cleansing.
Or if you start to smell.
In our teachings, we call it spiritual hygiene.
Yeah.
There are certain rituals and ceremonies and prayers you must do out of choice on a regular basis, just like changing your sheets, taking a shower, brushing your teeth. Each one's going to have its own specific purpose for the layers that are interacting with you.
And Andrew's always taught that it's our responsibility as well, equal to our level of awareness, to maintain that spiritual hygiene.
Yes,
I do mine through
Sorry, guys.
In that spiritual hygiene, it's like what Michele brought up earlier, where she was referencing John's reference of a hitchhiker. Throughout our daily lives, whether we go to the bank or to the grocery store, we can encounter people that exude this negative energy, this negative personality, and those energies can latch onto us. And just like when we're out working in the garden, we can get dirt under our fingernails and everything. Well, just like we said, it's very similar spiritually, where these negative energies can accumulate and attach to us. And so from time to time, we do have to take the time to cleanse that off and get rid of it. Because when a person is in their living life, they're a negative person. They're just really bad in how they carry themselves. I mean, even to the point of being a murderer or something at that level. When they cross over, that doesn't mean all of a sudden they're a ball of light and very, they can be just as bad on the other side.
Yep.
And so we have to be cautious of those things and protect ourselves from those energies. But
Yes.
like John said, and what was referenced here, it's it's a form of hygiene and bathing, just like we brush our teeth and wash our hair.
Exactly.
And yeah,
And then there are
And right now,
specific rituals, like the whole metaphorically, what is brushing your teeth? It's not to just have
right,
bad breath; it's to have clean words.
yes,
right,
Okay, that's the
true,
energy transfer. Taking a bath is also purging out other people's negative energies, so you recognize what is your own. Because when
right,
something enters your field, I use this statement, all of a sudden something in your mind says, kick your cat. You know that's not you. You know that's an external source. And if it's something's in
Yes.
your field and you allow it, you must say, no, you can't be in my field anymore.
yeah,
And exercise one's free will through the purging and the cleansing of the energy that's dirtied your own light.
yeah.
well, in
And it's
some
not
extreme
only just
cases, you have to
go ahead.
actually, maybe in your home you're experiencing some type of negative energy. Sometimes you have to be very vocal to those energies that are coming in and occupying that.
Yes,
And I think that at times that's very, very, very powerful. If that's your domicile, that's your home. Sometimes you have to stand your ground. Sometimes you have to protect yourself, protect
Yep.
your family, your little ones, and you have to verbally tell these energies to leave. You're not welcome here. You don't belong here, and you
right.
need to get out. And I think that's very powerful in some situations. People don't realize how much
Right.
power they have to be able to tell these things to leave.
I
I've had
call
to
it
do
the
that
out,
very
I call,
recently, Stan.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I call it
sure.
the out loud, name it to claim it experience.
Yeah,
If
Yeah.
something's
Yeah,
in your reality, you got to claim your reality. And this is not just peeing on proverbial territory. It's using the expression of your free will and the connected of your faith and your ability to use prayers to create a force that repels without vengeance.
right.
Because if you're taking vengeance on something, you're as bad as it.
yeah.
True.
And you've
And
got
I
to
think
do
the
with
that.
karma, there's definitely something related to karma where if we treat somebody in a negative way, it's going to come back on us later on. It will. And so I think it's very important. You know, many religions refer to the golden rule, but I think it's very, very, very simple. It's something we all have. If we kick a cat, if we kick a dog, we know in our heart that's wrong. We're hurting
yeah,
another living entity, another being, another creature, and it'll come back on us. I think, you know. So it's
And
Okay.
you've got to use that spiritual responsibility with joy as well and happiness and not being too stuck and stiff as you're doing it. You've got to remember to have that smile and joy as you're doing the
right.
journey because it just makes everything so much better and more potent with a smile and joy.
exactly, Dan. And what I was going to say as well is we talk about energy, and there's a lots of emphasis put upon negative energy. Well, energy is energy, and
Right.
right now there are 7 of us here on this show being observed by hundreds of people in real time, which will be
Yep.
4,000 people within a couple of weeks. And that's not even thinking about the unseen that they're tuning into this show as well. And each one of those is projecting energy onto us, whether it be positive, negative, or neutral. And you just can't have that energy sitting on you. It will become a manner of haunting eventually. So we have to go through
Right.
regular clearing ceremonies and rituals just to be able to do these types of shows.
True.
So,
You know, it's
so
really interesting. I had an
but
experience just last week with this. We were talking about the power of the word. I was doing an interview with a gentleman who was living up in the Uinta Basin, and he was sharing his experiences of the things he saw. You know, the negative energy and the positive energy of things. And spirit spoke to me and says, you know, take some of the medicine that you have that we've been practiced in, and I gave each of them some of it, and I said, now take it and just rub yourself, and just clear out that field within you of the talks that we've been talking about. And all of a sudden everything deadened, like there was a spirit of reverence. You couldn't hear the music that was playing in the lobby of the hotel. Everything was silenced, and you could tell there was that reverent moment, and you could tell that cleansing was going on. And they were quite amazed what was going on, because they audibly could not hear anything. But I knew that there was that reverence and that protection and the cleansing that went on, because sometimes it can be very physical.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to touch on something real quick before we go to questions from the chat room. So there's a common process where drugs are being prescribed by psychologists for kids who are clearly haunted. And one of those examples, those kids who cut themselves. As soon as you experience cutting, there is a ghost there. There is a ghost absolutely bull-weevilled its energy into that child. And then they get drugged, and the ghost gets bonded to that kid for very long periods of time. Those drugs act like cannabis or heroin to those ghosts. Okay? There are so many things wrong with pharmaceutical drugs that we have no idea the effect on the spirit realm. And we can't just wholesale ignore the unseen realm anymore, and how pharmacology connects those realms together. And when in psychology, who doesn't believe in ghosts, doesn't believe in any of that other stuff, we run into how do you raise a family to deal with energies such as ghosts? And what are some of your things you were saying before? What's in your culture? What are some of the other things that you may be able to give them as advice if they were to run into something?
For me, one of the theories that I've come up with, that something that we all see today, is these incidents of active shooters and mass killings and things. And for me, in looking at that phenomenon, I think that it actually is rooted in possession.
Yes.
Whether it would be demonic possession or, but I think those individuals committing those acts, just like you mentioned drugs, I think an individual that is in some way, they are vulnerable, whether it's because of alcoholism or drug use or mental illness or something of that nature, that negative energy sees that. Or maybe it's somebody dabbling with a Ouija board.
Yeah.
They are targeted by that negative energy that takes possession of them. They have the means and the opportunity to carry out these horrific acts. They do, and then after it's over, when they're asked, why did you do it? They're like, I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I committed what I did. And you hear relatives and friends say, oh my God, I never imagined that he's not the type of person that could have done this,
Right.
But I think the reason all too often is that there is in some way, a possession that's occurring. And I feel in recent times, there's what I've termed as a demonic convergence, where things have happened that allow these negative energies to manifest and to influence people to commit these acts and stuff. And that's just something I've thought.
Yeah, demonic convergence, great way. And that's why I refer to cocaine, heroin dealers. The demonic convergence is around them and all of their minions that are in the dealing process.
Right.
And many of the Mexican cartels do their own form of dark magic on all the drugs that they put out.
Yep.
Okay? There's a whole other way of seeing reality. And as to add to the mass shooters, I really think 2/3 of all the mass shooters are possessions. Whether it's because of the pharmacological interaction where the thing gets hooked onto the energies that the person's doing, and the only way that the entity can get free is by forcing something like a mass shooting.
Yeah.
So Andrew, do you suppose that this is an intentional program that's being put out there to the world, especially the young folks, to get them hooked onto these substances mind
Yeah, it's
altering
been done.
substances. So
It's ancient as days, just like the opium wars. Alchemical and magical interference with drugs has been going on for a very long time.
hmm
It's
hmm
ancient. It's ancient in our culture.
And when it comes to sociological things, um, you have people that go into the military and they see horrific things on the battlefield, and they come back and they have a very difficult time dealing with that. And what's amazing is that we fly them back within hours from the battlefield, and they're out in the airport walking around. Uh, some of my friends, they won't even drive under a bridge without changing lanes because of the idea that somebody's going to drop an IED on them from the other side.
Yep.
So you have this, and in Navajo culture and most Native cultures, what you had was when somebody came back from war, there was a healing ceremony that took place that would help
And there,
to cope.
there was also a ceremony before they went into battle, before they left to go into the war. The ceremony was done to allow them to become a soldier, with that mindset,
hmm
and to protect them. And then it's done once they got back, to bring them back to where you're involved in your community, your family, your environment, and those kind of things. So there's a start and there's a finish to it.
You know, the real irony, the vast majority of shooters are not in the military. When's the last time it was an ex-military guy that shot up a whole bunch of people? Not in any recent memory, has it been?
Now, probably in the 60s, the tower shooter in Texas.
Right. That's
Yeah.
What does that say? What does that say? If it's not the guys who went to war doing the killing, it's the young, influenced minds that have been overtaken, whether it's drugs, sex, rock and roll, culture, ghosts, demons, or anything, and all of that in between, or all of that chemistry just creating persecution and chaos.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Things
no, like John said earlier, there's no balance. There's no harmony in that individual's life. And, they lean from one extreme to the other, and
Yeah.
that causes problems.
Disharmony is popular right now. Anyway, we had a shooter over in the UK who was part of the incel community. I don't know if you're familiar with that. These are people, men who feel that they are celibate by force because women avoid them. So he chose to go out and kill women. There just seems to be the last was the transgender shooter just recently in America. There just seems to be so much of these groups right now that all they feed on is division. It's what they're about.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the point where we've got to take a couple questions from the chat room.
Yeah, we've got some great questions today.
So do you want to
there
pick the questions? We have time for 2 questions. We're already a little over our time here. Go ahead,
I
Maddie,
like
just
the
pick
one
some
that
questions.
says, "Where do we learn sacredness?" I like that one.
Good one. It starts with you having to make a choice that sacredness means something to you, and that faith actually means something to you, and beginning a daily practice. Okay?
Well, I think we're, as a human being, we're given that sense of right and wrong. Whenever we interact with another human being through our daily lives, if we show anger and negative words to another individual, we know that's wrong. And the same with when when our grandparents are providing us information, we don't have to be told those words are sacred. They are. We understand that within us. So I think we're all given that. It's just some people, in how they're raised or how they carry themselves, they either choose to dismiss that or not be in tune to that, or others are very in tune to that. So I think sacredness is unique to each individual, but I
Innate.
think we all have that.
Yeah. Innate. but we still have to practice it.
True.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
And
like
the journey
you
to
don't.
practice. Yeah.
If you don't use your muscles, they're going to atrophy, and so
True.
you have to exercise it.
Yeah.
And you
So
have
many
to
people
fix
confuse
all-
thinking with doing.
What I like to tell people, sacred practice begins with daily practice. And here's what I call the effort scale. 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week is C plus effort. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week is B plus effort. 90 minutes a day, 6 days a week is A plus effort. What you choose to do during that time is always going to be up to your sacred practice, what you're making sacred for you. And it's more than just meditating. It's doing things in your reality that use the word spiritual hygiene. Okay? Just as you would brush your teeth, vacuum your floors, clean your house, there are techniques that you can learn that do that for your layered reality.
And you have to
It could
fix
be
that.
as simple, and we joke about it all the time. You let somebody else in front of you as you're driving,
Yeah.
and you tell yourself, "Well, I'm gaining good karma by doing that." Because if you cut them off and honk at them, you know, I mean, in Los Angeles they have bumper stickers that says "Cover me, I'm changing lanes." You might get shot.
Right?
Yeah.
And to return
Andrew.
to that
Yes.
Andrew, you and I have been speaking as of late, but one of the most thing that I've come to learn is loving myself first. And when we
Yes.
can love ourselves first, then we can love the world outside of us. And so we
I think
create
that's
that
very,
sacredness.
very important.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
A lot of
Very
people become
important.
martyrs. Yeah, they love others before they love themselves.
Exactly.
How
part of
can you
it-
show respect to other people if you don't even respect yourself?
Right.
Exactly.
Which is a common issue throughout many of the cultures throughout the world, because martyrdom has been ingrained into you at such a young age. Give to others before you give to yourself.
Right.
Okay, spirituality is the practice of giving to yourself, and for those few moments you're doing it, it's not about others, it's about you. You and your connection to you and the frequency that you create with it and the light that you want to create. Light is not just, light fairy worker stuff. It's you. It's the potentiality that you get to create with.
Yeah.
And if you're constantly letting others dirty your light, you won't know what your light looks like. Thus, you must accept the love of yourself. That's the first part of making anything sacred.
Right.
And to return
agree.
to sacredness, you've got to fix broken faith as well. So if you have any trauma or places in your life earlier where your faith was broken, you have to be responsible to fix that and allow source connection to come back to that sacred flow in a way.
Yeah, you can't
Absolutely.
carry that baggage.
Forgive
Which is called
yourself
the
is
inner
the
work.
next one.
Right,
Mhm,
right.
the inner
Which is
work.
the inner. Forgiving yourself is the beginning of the inner work, and inner work can be described in many, many ways. The first part of inner work is you got to use your out loud voice and claim your power back that you've given away out of ignorance. Ignorance for not paying attention to what was going on in the moment. Okay, and then the next step is the strategy of faith. What am I going to do with my faith and my connection to faith over the next several months? And stick with it.
So there was a question here, Andrew, from Maty Lucia, which is pertinent to not what we were just talking about then, but to the general theme of the show. So it says, could you speak about the haunting sand possessions that happen at events like Burning Man? I've seen videos recently of celebs who went to Burning Man and came back looking completely possessed. So have you guys seen the Burning Man rituals and things that go on at those kind of places?
I've heard Andrew talk about this before.
So
Yes.
that is an assemblage of demons, ghosts, negative entities, predatorial entities that come with the people going there. None of them go with a sacred intent, and none of them leave with a sacred intent. The vast majority of them are going to get drugs, sex, prostitution, etc., etc., etc. It is like a shark's feeding frenzy for negative entities. Now, many festivals are like that. Many festivals are like that, including high schools. Okay? That's the first place where things assemble like that. If you've got a thousand kids going to a school, and 30 of those kids have entities attached to them, those 30 entities have access to 970 more kids that they never had access to. And then when you have major parties like Burning Man, it's where they go to like, hey, I don't want to be in San Francisco anymore. Let's go to Burning Man and possess someone and catch a ride to New York City. And that happens all the time at those major festivals. And
I
when
think on the opposite, you can also have where collectively you have a mass of people that may be praying toward toward the help of somebody that's injured or that has a disease, and those like-minded people in the prayers can actually result in almost miracle-like
yes,
results because
yes.
of the thought and the intent that's going into that, and it's focused on one central
So
result.
let's look at a ceremony where you got maybe 3, 4, 500 drummers, 2, 300 dancers. Absolutely, you're creating a focused intent. And if let's say you're given a target for that focused intent, like bringing relief to a veteran, or bringing about a peaceful situation to a riots or something that's going on. The power of collective prayer has been known about in our innards for so long, and the
Right.
power of collective prayer is vital to learn and relearn and then earn and relearn over and over again. Because that power in collective prayer is what can knit us all back together as a broken society.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Which
those
is the
mass
importance of
meditations, Andrew,
sacredity.
you talk about.
Because without sacredity, without the sacred process, then even those processes can become weaponized. So that's
They
again
can.
the importance of the hygiene, the spiritual hygiene, and the self practice.
Okay?
Well, for some too, and this is just humans in general. Everybody likes to be different. They want to stand out.
Sure.
And sometimes being different is doing things that are outrageous to other people. And you get that attention. And so now you're going to be
Excuse me.
more outrageous. And you keep doing it over and over and over, and it becomes this cycle. And, all that just because you don't want to be just like everybody else. You don't want to be that gray person in the crowd. You want to stand out. And sometimes to stand out in a negative sense is really, what you're looking for, because then either people fear you,
Yes.
and this is what we found with skinwalkers, is they control whole communities by fear.
Yes.
And in the case of an interview with one, they said this is fun. They go out to do this for fun because they know the community is terrorized, and so that's why they do it. So it's really interesting that just our human nature. I always like to say that maybe the aliens haven't actually come and landed and visited us, because there's signs up there that says these are a violent, destructive people. And so you can look at this ant farm, but you can't touch. You
Yeah.
you can't have any communication because you'll get contaminated.
Instead of
And how
beware
true
of the
that really
dog,
is.
beware of humans.
Yeah.
We are indeed the rabid dogs of the solar system.
Yes. All right, guys, we're at the end of the show. You guys have a website or an event you like to tell people about?
Well, we're going to be at Contact in the Desert on the 1st, or the 2nd, I should say, 2nd through the 4th in Palm Springs. Uh, I will be in Fairbanks, Alaska directly after that, for the Bigfoot conference there. And then in later part of June, both me and Stan will be at the Roswell incident. And there's others that are coming up, but they're a little further out. We're hoping one day soon to be in Europe, and we've been to Scotland. We'd love to come to England, and we're just all about that. We love traveling. I think it's for me, it's the Cheyenne blood that's in me that just makes me want to travel. And so yeah, that's what's coming up.
Okay.
If you get
Michele?
a chance, I would like to say, if you get a chance, watch the Netflix episode Paranormal Rangers. If you want to see a little bit more of the information related to the investigations that John and I have done in the past, maybe if you could watch that. So.
Yeah, we were very careful with that production company, and we told them we weren't going to do it unless they portrayed it accurately. And hands down, they did a good job. So we approve of it.
Michele, do you want to plug your upcoming events and website if you have a website?
Yes. I am going to also be at Contact in the Desert the 2nd through the 4th in Indian Wells, California. Anybody live there, come purchase the ticket and come participate and hear all the wonderful speakers, the Paranormal Rangers, myself, and probably 57 others.
Yes.
Tonight I'm going to be hosting, on a show with Alan Smith. It's called Paranormal Now and Coffee and UFOs. And that starts
will it be on YouTube?
On StreamYard is what it says. And it is an audio.
Then.
What's that?
It's probably YouTube.
Okay, YouTube. And it starts at 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 to 7 p.m. Pacific Time. And it's a 1-hour show. And I will be talking extensively of some of the things that are happening in the Uinta Basin through my 6 years of being down there.
Okay, Laura, give a way for people to get a hold of you.
Just like to say thank you, and it's been an honour to have you three guys on, and I've really enjoyed this like many people have, so thanks for coming on. Yes, Laura Massey, Facebook, or twofeathersmedicine.com, and I will be back with Prayer Sunday this Sunday coming. Thanks, guys.
Okay, Dale, people will forget a hold of you.
So if you want any psychic surgery sessions, go to daletobin.com. And next Tuesday, we're back with the Talking Stick show as well. We'll be having Andrew and David Ellis on. And again, thank you guys. What a show. Really, really fun. Thank you for coming on.
Mm-hmm.
Maddie, for you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate everybody that texted in and made comments and is watching the show. Thank you for that.
Fantastic. Okay, yep. So thank you very much, guys. You can get hold of me at twofeathersmedicine.com. Private sessions, psychic surgery, psychic readings. There's some light language products there and light language course. So yeah, twofeathersmedicine.com, and just click on my face.
Well, Jonathan, Stan, Michele, you guys are amazing guests. We really push the natures of understanding the different layers of reality. I look forward to having you guys on again sometime and going deeper into the potentials, possibilities, and helping people just learn about the other worlds that are out there. Thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Healing comes in many forms, all the colors aligned. You are free as a dove when you choose, a sovereign state of being.
And allow this product to work with the 7 color chakras in our own energy system.
Meditations can trigger DNA wisdom and memories in light, out-creating our limited chemical memories. So sit back, relax, as we take you on a journey of light and colour.